Another of our core project members, Professor Muhammad Yusuf bin Muhammad, also from the International Islamic University in Malaysia, chimes in here. Professor Yusuf is an assistant professor in health sciences and comments on the theological importance of the intellect, or al-aql.
In Islamic worldview, the akal is very important because we are a special creation of God as being given the rational capacity. But this rational capacity is used first to understand the revelation. Because the revelation given by God, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the Quran, and the authentic prophetic traditions, you need akal, you need mind to understand it. You need to understand it whether is this obligation taken literally or is this obligation taken contextually, and how to worship, how your actions to the others, how your actions to the environment, what the good things that you need to do and what the bad things you need to avoid. That's the purpose of akal.
What I think Professor Yusuf and Professor Hashi are getting at is that human beings are endowed with rationality in order to make choices, and are then held morally responsible for those choices. It would make little sense, pun intended here, to be given the gift of intellect or the burden of responsibility if one's actions were fully determined by a deity or by the laws of nature. Against this backdrop, Professor Hashi explains a core tenet of the Islamic faith.
This question is addressed within one of the six tenets of the Islamic faith, known as al-qadar wal-qadar, the belief in the divine destiny. Then the subject is addressed are the subjects that we are addressing today. Are human beings free or they are predetermined? Qada basically means predestination or preordained. Qada, the Arabic word. And qadar basically means destiny or fix it or measure it, right? Or fate it. So a Muslim is required to believe in the divine destiny or in the divine predestination, right? Predestination basically means the knowledge of God, which covers everything and everyone from beginning to end, eternal knowledge that is covering all. And qadar means destiny, which means everything exists in the knowledge of God, but at a certain point, everything will be brought in to its right time to exist and appear, manifested. So you have the knowledge of God that is covering everything, including you and I. But qadar means God makes things at the right time, in the right place, and then they appear according to the plan and the design of God. Qadar. So therefore, in Islam, we believe that God knows everything, including your behavior, my behavior, and your action and my action.
So, if everything is in God's foreknowledge, and He brings all actions about, then are we not determined? As Professor Hashi pointed out, the core principles of al qada and al qadar raise questions about the ways in which our lives are fated, and where free will lies.
Then the question comes, since God knows everything before I am born to this world, He knows what I'm going to do, He knows who am I, where am I going to exist, and so forth. Then am I free for my actions? Or is it something that is already being ordained, determined for me? Are we free for our actions? Or actually we are not free for our actions, whereby God has decided everything and God knows everything, and what you are going to do is already being decided by God. Therefore, you are just like a machine. You are just programmed. You are just doing what you are being destined for. You cannot go beyond that.
The tenet of divine decree tells us about aspects of the fatedness of humans, which prompts the kinds of questions about free will that we're asking about in this episode. And as Professor Yusuf explains, it also points us towards certain attributes of God.
In Islamic view, when we talk about the divine decree, that's the word we call it in Arabic is al-qada wal-qadar. Al-qada means the divine decree. To make it very easy for us to understand, at least there are four criteria. Number one, we believe that the God is omniscience, which means that God is all knowing, past, present, and future. God knows everything. And the second thing is that the knowledge of God is in written form. We put it on the preserved tablet. They call it as the preserved tablet. And the third thing is that the will of God always what we call is much more higher than the will of the creations, which means whatever things that happen in this world only can be done with the permission of God. This is the third thing. The fourth criteria is that God is the one who creates our actions. Now you might ask that how is it possible that God created our actions? Because in Islamic faith, there are many verses of Quran on these things that Allah created the actions to us, good and bad, but we are the one who choosing that particular action.
So we've heard about the human faculty of intelligence or reason, which gives us the capacity to choose, and that this capacity comes with moral responsibility and accountability for our actions. We've also heard about the tenet of divine destiny and predestination, which informs us of God's foreknowledge and omniscience. Professor Yusuf then further described that our destinies are metaphorically written down in a preserved tablet. For Muslim listeners, he was signaling to the prophetic tradition that the first thing God created was the pen, and that he commanded the pen to write all the things he has ordained until the day of judgment. Those decrees are preserved in the tablet, al-lawh al-mahfuz, so to speak. With that said, how do we reconcile all of this with free will and choice? Professor Yusuf provides an overview of the spectrum of Islamic thought on this topic.
In Islamic theology or Islamic school of thought, indeed we have a spectrum. We have a group, we call it Jabariya, school of thought. We believe that everything is governed by God. And they were quoting certain verses of the Quran when God mentions that God created all of our actions. So they believe that we are living like a puppet. So it seems like to be like a essentialist, to be like what we call hard determinists, that we do not have any control whatsoever. Everything has been determined by God. We have another group which is the Mu'tazilites, who believe that no, we cannot subscribe evil to God. So humans are creating their own actions, and humans are accountable on their own actions. We cannot subscribe this to God. And the mainstream, the Sunni groups, believe that we are in the middle, in which that we do have laws, as mentioned earlier, and things that being governed by God. God is the one who knows everything. God's created our action, but we have the ability to acquire those things based on our intention. So when we have a certain intentions, God created a particular action, we chose to take it. So we are being accountable on the choice that we took.
The three positions within Islamic thought that Professor Yusuf described appear to have some overlap with the spectrum of secular philosophical positions we heard about earlier in this episode. The Jabariya school of thought is akin to the hard determinists, albeit with a different conception of the nature of predetermination. Secular hard determinists would cite naturalistic forces like evolution, whereas the Jabariya school of thought sees predetermination as coming from God. The Mutazilite school of thought shares a similar outlook with libertarians, as they believe that humans possess free will without constraint. The mainstream Sunni school of thought is akin to compatibilists, in that both take the view that we have at least some ability to exercise free will, even though there are things that are beyond our control. To nuance this further, the Sunni school of thought that Professor Yusuf is referring to are actually at least two schools, the Ashari and the Maturidi, and one may even add the Athari as well, all with further nuance. But for now, let's stick with the division he presented for our conversation.